Hi, I'm Dr. Jim Hoven, your host of the Difference Makers podcast. This is a place where people come together that are making a difference for those who want to make a difference. And that's you. We're bringing thought leaders together in a sense of fusion where ideas and concepts and personalities are all driven together into one place at one time. And this is no different. In this episode, you're going to see cool things from cool people making a difference.
Welcome to the Difference Makers podcast. I'm Joe LoRusso, pilot, lawyer, and director of the aviation division here at Ramos. And I'm taking over this podcast. Usually Dr. Hoven's here, but I'm taking it over completely to talk about a letter that just came from Congress that was sent directly to the administrator of the FAA on February 7th regarding mental health policies. Lot to talk about surrounding this. It's a very exciting time right now in mental health and aeromedical reform. So let's get right into it. What is the letter? First and foremost, it's a bipartisan letter. Both sides of the aisle got together, signed it. There's literally like 4 pages of signatures that follow it. And they sent this letter to the administrator, asking the administrator of the FAA to do a number of things. The first thing is to completely restructure the aeromedical standards, regulations, policies, guidelines concerning mental health, which is a very big deal right now. And they also asked the FAA to clean up how they process medical applications and how they review medical records and how they review medical files. I can tell you right now, as I sit here, CAMI, the Civil Aeronautical Medical Institute down in Oklahoma, CAMI's running like anywhere from a 7 to 9 month backlog in actually processing medical applications, 8500s. If the matter goes to the federal air surgeon, that's backed up somewhere between like 13 and 15 months. So this letter that came from Congress to the FAA, there's in paragraph 1 specifically said this needs to be cleaned up because we have pilots that are out of work, that are getting kicked off a short-term disability, getting bumped onto long-term disability, and some pilots who are, they're out there roofing right now because they just can't get a medical due to the delays at CAMI and the federal air surgeon. So very big letter. Why did it come out right now? You may have noticed that ever since the issue on the Alaskan flight with the Horizon jump seater that tried to pull the T-handles, we have had a very big focus in mental health and aeromedical standards. We've had a couple other incidents that's popped up as well. We had a young student at UND unfortunately take his life. And then just very recently, we had a young flight student, instrument student working on his commercial, take his life in an airplane down in Texas. So there's a very big push right now by our government to make the FAA bring the medical standards up to snuff, so to speak, right? Make it current. After the Horizon event, the Horizon pilot event, we had the NTSB on November 30th, I believe, say that they were going to do a safety summit. The safety summit was essentially a roundtable to discuss the problems right now with aeromedical, with the aeromedical standards, policies, guidelines, basically addressing why are we having such a problem with mental health in aviation. And then we also had on December 5th, the FAA decided to act. Go figure. And they did they formed the ARC. And this committee is designed to, or tasked rather, to modernize the regulations as they impact mental health and a pilot's ability to seek mental health treatment. Quick side note and sidebar, I think it's hilarious that the NTSB first announced that they were going to do their safety summit on December 5th. The summit was going to happen on December 6th. It did happen on December 6th. The exact same day, the FAA announced that they were going to do an ARC. So once again, it was the FAA following the coattails of everybody else saying, oh, wait, you guys think that's important? I guess we should do it too. What I think is particularly interesting about that is the NTSB then went back on their public announcement and said, well, we actually had this idea back in November. So we do have a little bit of a everybody's trying to get into the limelight right now, but I don't care. I honestly don't care. Because this is an issue that has been affecting my community, the aviation community, my community as a pilot, as an attorney, for a very long time, not just since November. So I'm happy that we're having multiple agencies rush to it, and I'm happy that we're having Congress come to the table and hold the FAA accountable as well. Now, this letter is ahead of the FAA reauthorization, the House Bill 3935, that's going to the Senate. That already cleared the House. It's the FAA Reauthorization Act. In the Reauthorization Act, we do have a section in there that this community fought for that says that the FAA, within 180 days of that bill becoming law, that they have to establish a committee to review aeromedical standards, particularly those concerning substance abuse, substance dependence, mental health, ADHD, ADD, and a slew of other topics. So pretty excited about that. It did go through the House with 60 amendments. And as we all know, a lot of times amendments get stuck onto bills as they go to the Senate. Some having to do with the topic, some not having to do with the topic. So I'm interested to see what of those 60 actually have to do with aviation. But that was, as that bill is moving now from the House to the Senate, the letter coming from Congress to the FAA was basically, hey, just so you know, FAA, this is moving to the Senate and you better start acting now because that bill's going to get passed and you don't want to be behind the curve. So really excited, really hopeful that something is going to happen with that. Where do we sit currently? So I get asked this a lot. About, we're having this big push now to a new aeromedical system. And the question that people say to me is why? Why do we need this? What do we have currently? Why aren't pilots getting treatment? Why do we need this change, and what does that change look like? Right now, I can tell you, and this has been this way for a very long time, pilots are very scared and hesitant to get treatment. So depending on, for example, depending on your medical and your license and what you do with flying and how old you are, that dictates how often you have to go to an aeromedical examiner. For example, me, I have to go every year. And when I go every year, I got to fill out the medical application, the 8500-8. And as it exists right now under box 18 in the application, it is very, very poorly written. It makes every pilot disclose any mental health condition that they may have, any disabilities that they may have, any symptoms that they may have. It almost asks pilots to be, both an attorney and a doctor, which is crazy on that application. In addition to that, it also asks you what health professionals you've seen in the last 3 years. And if you look at the instructions of the 8500, it requires the pilot to report getting help, getting counseling is the official term, counseling regarding anything having to do with mental health. So who can provide counseling? Well, according to the FAA, a psychiatrist can, a psychologist can, a therapist can, obviously a counselor can, a licensed social worker can. The pool is deep. So if you look at the instructions, if you had a family member pass away and you went and saw a grief counselor as a pilot, that would need to be reported to the FAA under the 8500. Then what happens? Then your AME, your doc that you're seeing there, is not going to give you a medical that day. You're not going to walk out of that office with a medical, which of course you need in your pocket to be able to fly. That doctor is going to defer down to Oklahoma City, and then Cami is going to review the application and review the answers into box 18 and box 19. And they're going to kick back what we call a 413 letter. And a 413 letter is 14 CFR 67.413. That letter is going to ask the airman to produce all medical records, all treatment records, all counseling records, a letter from a treating psychiatrist or psychologist regarding your clinical presentation having to do with anxiety, grief, depression, you name it, anything under that umbrella, right? you're going to submit all that stuff. You know, a dutiful pilot will submit all those documents trying to get their medical back in their pocket as quickly as they can. They submit that stuff to CAMI. CAMI's going to kick another 413 letter out, and that 413 letter is going to say, go see one of our docs. Go see a HIM psychiatrist. Go see a HIM psychologist. Why does that happen? Why don't they kick it out, the HIMs in the first place? I have no idea, but why does it follow? The reason why it follows is because the FAA is not set up right now to take clinical records. Right now in the clinical world, we're on the DSM-5 TR. The FAA is still using the DSM-3 from 1987. The DSM being the diagnostic manual that diagnoses mental conditions. The FAA, when they look at the new clinical documents, they essentially say, well, we don't really know what to do with that. We're not entirely sure if that's aeromedical or not. So they kick out a 413 letter asking for an evaluation from a HIMSS doc. The HIMSS doc is going to review per aeromedical standards. What that means, I have no idea still. And then once the airman goes and gets that evaluation, which could run anywhere from $4,000 to $7,000, that is going to come back to CAMI. CAMI's likely going to look at it and go, I don't know, this kind of seems like it needs the federal air surgeon on it. They're going to throw it over to Washington, D.C. By that time, the pilot, who initially was just trying to report grief of the loss of a loved one, has a 7-month delay in CAMI to get all the paperwork sent in, has another 7-month delay to get all the HIMSS reports in, has another 13-month delay to get everything to the federal air surgeon and review. And then the federal air surgeon could come back and ask for new records because it's been so long since they've reviewed clinical records. It's not uncommon for a pilot to be out of work, out of the industry, out of the air for 1 to 2 years, if not greater. That's what's happening right now. That's why we had the big push, especially that segment in the February 7th letter that says, hey, FAA, you need to clean up the process in which you review records. You need to clean up the speed. You need to put doctors on it quicker. All that stuff was really, really impactful and a great part of that February 7th letter. So here's the other question. Why don't pilots just go get help, right? All you got to do is lie, right? Just go get help on your own. You don't have to report it. You don't have to say anything to anybody. And I get it. That's a common thing that people say. They don't understand why a pilot is so cautious. Here's why. On the medical application form, that is a government document. And if you knowingly or intentionally defraud the government on that document, if you as a pilot go and get treatment, fill out that form and say, no, I didn't see anybody, I didn't get treatment, and the FAA finds out about it, you're losing every certificate in your pocket immediately on an emergency revocation. So if you have an ATP, you're losing your ATP, you're losing your commercial, you're losing your CFI, you're losing everything, all your type ratings, gone, and you're losing your medical. And you could be at risk for 3 years in jail, $250,000 in civil penalty. So it's a very, very big risk for a pilot legally to go get help and to choose not to report it on that form. Notwithstanding that issue, I can say this as a member of this community for the past 2 decades. Aviation pilots respect this industry so much. And please keep in mind, we've also represented air traffic controllers that deal with the exact same issue, even though they're employed by the FAA. I'll broadly say industry professionals, aviation industry professionals care so much about this industry that they would never think to even form a side. They would never think to lie to the FAA about getting treatment, about seeking medical help. It just doesn't even cross the mental. And that's not out of respect for the FAA. That's out of respect for this industry, and out of respect for the men and women that we fly with, that control us, that are mechanics, that are dispatchers. This is very much so an industry of respect. It always has been. It always will be. We have statutes, for example, like 6153, that says that a pilot who knows that they have a medical condition cannot act as pilot in command. They have to self-ground. I can say very confidently that a majority, if not all of our pilots and clients that we represent, they take that statute very seriously. And they choose not to fly if they know they're dealing with grief of a loss of a loved one, if they know they're dealing with, anxiety and a divorce. They choose to stay out of the sky out of respect for this community and this industry. So, big issue. And it's been brewing constantly, the fact that pilots can't get help. They choose not to get help, so they're not ever in a position where they are forced to lie to the government. They just choose not to get help. It's easier that way. You don't have to report anything. And finally now, we have the pressure from Congress, from the Senate, saying to the FAA, this is unacceptable. Pilots shouldn't have to live this way. Air traffic controllers shouldn't have to live this way. Dispatchers shouldn't have to live this way. This is a safety-sensitive industry. We're flying people all over the world. This is something that we want pilots to feel comfortable to go get help, to go get treatment, and then to safely return back to the cockpit when they're clinically able to return back to the cockpit. So, big push right now. Very, very excited about everything that's going forward. What do we have to look forward to? Hopefully the reauthorization bill, right? Coming through the Senate. I expect it to come through. We're kind of facing another government shutdown potential in March, but hopefully this goes through the Senate and we now have the Reauthorization Act into law. Also, the FAA's ARC that they announced on December 5th, that committee met in January. That committee met again in February. They're meeting again at the start of March, and they're supposed to release their recommendations to the FAA at the end of March. I don't know if those recommendations are going to be guidelines, if they're going to be changes to policies, if they're going to be changes to regulation. Unsure what it's going to be right now, but I'm really, really hopeful that it does happen in March. And I'm really, really hopeful that they don't ask for more time and that they at least put out something. Even if they ask for more time, for more substance, I hope they put out something in March. So big start to 2024. Hopefully this is going to be the year of change, that we can start having a safer aviation community. We can start having pilots actually getting help, actually seeking treatment. Very big year. That's why it's important. That's why I hijacked the podcast. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation. This is something that I am so happy that we're finally chatting about back and forth. If you found value in this, please leave us a 5-star review on all the podcast platforms, because it makes it more visible. It gets it out to people. And your feedback is incredibly important. We take those comments, we take those the calls, the emails about the podcast. We really internalize them, and we try and get back to people if they have questions or concerns, or we try and make more content to directly address that issue. While you're at it, we're on all the social media platforms as well on this issue. Instagram, Twitter, those are the only two that I know. Possibly TikTok is one as well. Get on all that stuff, share it, comment. Let's have an open discussion. Let's continue this dialogue so that we can make a difference in this industry and finally get aviation professionals the help that they need. Thank you so much.